$2,000 a stall. The council of the day, in order to support businesses, reduced it to $200 a stall. But I don't think we've had anybody come forward recently when there's a new development consideration of parking, whether or not the uses are changing, whether or not the building's been grandfathered in the past is all taken into consideration. As to the dollar amount of the account, I'm not sure. Mrs. Bauman, do you have that information available?
Not right at my fingertips at the moment, but as you've mentioned, Mayor Musalem, it's not a significant amount of money that we collect every single year for people that are willing to pay for their own reserved parking stall.
Councillor Garon.
Thank you, Your Worship. Through to Councillor Cunningham. It's not the actual merchants, it's whenever there's a person in a development permit area and they want to put in a new use, and that if they can't get enough parking, they have to pay in lieu of parking, and that's where that fund money, not all the merchants in town pay into a parking fund. No, it's just an in lieu if you, so it's just those people who are putting in newer, they're changing use or putting in newer businesses that have to conform to how many parking spaces they need.
Councillor Ashley, Councillor Thorkelson, you're on the phone this evening. Do you have any questions of Mr. Pucci?
I think his report was very good and very fair.
Thank you.
Yeah, I don't have any questions at this time.
Okay, thank you very much. So the recommendation to council is that the mayor and council receive the following presentation on the progress of our capital works projects from the engineering coordinator. Moved by Councillor Kinney, seconded by Councillor Carlick-Pearson. Discussion? Question's been called. Those in favor? Thank you, Mr. Pucci. Your report's been received. Next is a report from the Chief Financial Officer regarding the purchasing policy, and this is an update. And the recommendation is that council adopt the new purchasing policy as presented. Mrs. Bauman, would you like to outline your policy, please?
Thank you, Your Worship. The present purchasing policy that the city is operating under is 11 years old and was only updated 9 years ago. In an attempt to update all of the policies citywide, we have targeted this one as being one of the ones to update. A bit of background is that the purchasing policy outlines the objectives and procedures with respect to the procurement of goods and services. It identifies the limits of purchasing authority, the process for vendor selection, and outlines procurement thresholds to reflect the city's commitment to an effective stewardship of city financial resources. A municipal purchasing policy is created to ensure that taxpayers obtain good value for money. The new policy permits a higher threshold for the quote process. It also makes it clear when a competitive procurement process is to be undertaken and when sole source purchases are permitted. Goods and services must be approved in the budget, and where not within the approved budget amount are submitted to council for approval anyway. The overall result of the new purchasing policy that is provided is to bring the city in line with current purchasing practices in the industry and provide clarification to staff to ensure that all purchases and procurement processes are performed at a high level of integrity, are open, transparent, and fair to all involved.
Thank you. I'll ask council if they have any questions of Mrs. Bauman regarding the purchasing policy. Yes, please go ahead.
That's just regarding the section on sole source purchases. And I'm just wondering when that, under the various different articles of when that would be looked into, would it be the city manager that would be signing off on that being okay?
Sole source purchases would still be within each supervisor and manager's approval thresholds.
Okay. So it would be like the manager of that department that would approve it.
That's correct. For instance, if
okay. Thank you.
Oh, okay.
I'll ask council to consider the recommendation that council adopt the new purchasing policy presented.
I have one.
Yes, please go ahead.
I have one concern, and that is that this policy looks fine to me, and I understand that from the report that it was updated, but I would have liked to have had the old policy in front of me so I could see what else is updated. I really don't think it's very good to have a new policy that's replacing a policy that you had unless you can read the two side by side.
So you would have liked a comparison.
Or else have one that's an edited copy so you know what was taken out or changed. Yes.
Right. Okay.
So I find it difficult to know if this is the best policy that we could have because I don't know what was changed from the old policy.
Mrs. Bombin, perhaps you want to outline the changes?
I can say that the approval thresholds used to be $1,500. If anything was under $1,500, then it wasn't necessary to have a major PO and 3 quotes, and that has been increased up to $5,000. That's one of the biggest ones because that's one of the ones that we run into more frequently, considering prices have gone up so much in the last 11 years. Purchases over $75,000 are still the same. Purchases between $25,000 and $75,000 have just added for clarity who is eligible to make those approvals. However, all of them are still within council approved budget. There was some more clarification on the sole source permissions, and that's essentially mainly when there's instances such as emergency or a single provider or time sensitive type purchases where we might be able to get it for a little bit cheaper if we were to go outside of the city, but it's obviously for reasons of getting the work done as soon as possible because it's necessary that we would go with a local provider, that sort of thing. But I can always hold off on this and provide the old one if you'd like, Councillor Thorkelson.
Councillor?
Well, I mean, if those are the changes, I didn't see anything wrong with this policy. I like the idea of actually being able to have a policy that goes to see the local sourcing actually first. But I don't know if everybody else in council feels easy about changing policy without having the other one in front of us. I'm uneasy, and I would rather it come back to the next meeting, but I don't want to hold things up either.
Mrs. Bombin, would you bring it up to the next meeting, please, with a comparison? We'll leave it at that.
Okay.
Councillor Cunningham?
One thing in here that I noticed is in purchases between $5,000 and $25,000, it says that with approval by soliciting a minimum of 3 quotes, either written or verbal, and then it says in the last that with minimum of 3 quotes, evidence in writing.
Yes, because a lot of purchases that are made between $5,000 and $25,000, there's many suppliers, even local ones, that don't have time to actually provide with written quotes, so they only give us verbal ones, and that creates a lot of problems with some of our managers who know that the prior purchasing policy said that they need written quotes.
Okay, if you bring back a comparison to the next council meeting, please. Next, under correspondence for action, there's a proclamation request from the United Way of Northern British Columbia. This is concerning September 2019 as United Way Month. The recommendation is that council declare September 2014 as United Way Month in the city of Prince Rupert. Moved by Councillor Kenny, seconded by Councillor Garon. Is there any discussion? Question's been called. Those in favor? Thank you. That motion's adopted. Next, under bylaws and development permits, there's a report from the city planner. This is regarding the Quality of Life Official Community Plan Amendment Bylaw number 3350, 2014, and Zoning Amendment Bylaw number 3351, 2014. There's 2 recommendations here. And one concerns the Quality of Life bylaw, and one concerns the Zoning Amendment bylaw. The Quality of Life bylaw, the recommendation is that council rescind the second reading of the City of Prince Rupert Quality of Life Official Community Plan Amendment Bylaw number 3350, 2014, and rescind the second reading of the City of Prince Rupert zoning amendment bylaw number 3351, 2014, and that council gives second reading to the amended City of Prince Rupert Quality of Life Official Community Plan Amendment Bylaw number 3350, 2014, and gives second reading as amended, or pardon me, gives second reading to the amended City of Prince Rupert Zoning Amendment Bylaw number 3351, 2014. Mr. Krekic, you better explain this because to somebody who doesn't understand this procedure, it would be very, very confusing.
Certainly, Your Worship. Subject of this report is referenced as Lot 444, and this is the area that I am pointing with a pointer here. The report that's in front of you essentially is exactly the same as the report that you saw on July 7th, with an exception that on July 28th, Council passed the resolution that staff brings a report forward for Council's consideration to amend the bylaw for Lot 444 so that the proponent's use is described as only for LNG. And so that front end of the conversation is all concerned with the text which is on page 25 in your agendas, Your Worship. And for the Quality of Life Official Community Plan, we are proposing to add a new section dealing specifically for the industrial component of this boundary extension, and a subsection for the open space or the green area. The green area remains same wording, and the industrial area is changed specifically to read, and perhaps for the context it's best to read the entire section, subsection. On May 15, 2014, the City of Prince Rupert received approval and amended letters of patent to include the area to the east, generally described as Lot 444. With increased demand for industrial land base, the easterly portion is suited for the heavy industrial use. And the next sentence is the amended sentence. In general, such projects require a large area for transportation and storage, and better described as liquefied natural gas, LNG, major industrial projects. From there on page 28, the change to the previously read bylaw is essentially in the heading, so it reads 7.50. I'll move this. That heavy industrial natural gas liquefied facility zone M5 is defined for this area up here. And so essentially by this recommendation is to rescind or to put aside the bylaws that were adopted on July 27 and to consider the newly penned bylaws which are in front of you now, Your Worship.
So if council considers this, they're taking a bylaw which allowed under the official community plan and subsequently the zoning bylaw, which was to be zoned M5 as a result of a public hearing process and council's further consideration after that process. You're now rescinding your second reading. You're asking council to read it for a second time as amended, with the use being specifically for liquefied natural gas.
Correct, Your Worship.
Okay, thank you.
Your Worship, I have some concerns still about this, and if I could express them starting on page 28.
Certainly, if I could just interrupt you and state that this is being done by the city within house simply because the city is still and may remain forever the owner of the property. Please go ahead, Councillor.
I wanted to say that I have a concern on page 28 by the definition of under 7.5.1 of permitted uses, and nowhere do I see it says liquid natural gas only. Would I see that the permitted use, even though it's entitled a liquefaction facility zone, it's bulk commodity storage and transportation, general and industrial use, and I'm not sure why we need to be so general. I would be much happier if the bylaw was just said that heavy industrial natural gas liquefaction facility zone permitted uses, the liquefaction, transportation, and storage of liquid natural gas, something like that. Not this bulk commodity storage and transportation, general industrial use.
Okay.
So I'm not quite sure. Mr. Kirkick may need to comment on that because it could be that we need to have some general language in there. But I'm also concerned about the community quality of life plan on page 25, and it says that again it says in general such projects require a large area. With increased demand for industrial land base, the easterly portion is suited for heavy industrial use. I would like to see that quality of life plan say, with increased demand for industrial land base, the easterly portion could be suited for liquid natural gas use or whatever, liquid natural gas facility. Because I am really objecting to putting in, allowing any other kind of facility to go in there if we chose not to rezone it. If the natural gas project did not, if we rezoned it and a natural gas project did not go ahead, that we could have other industrial uses on that site or other types of petrochemicals being utilized or dealt with at that site. I'm still wanting to restrict this more.
Right, okay. Well, before you propose that as a recommendation, Councillor Thorkelson will get a comment from Mr. Krekic, and the council can decide. And certainly we're a long way off from any sort of rezoning. Mr. Krekic, could you please comment on what Councillor Thorkelson has said?
All of those comments are within the context of what was requested, and any of those recommendations for change are fine. I just want to, following the conversation, should this become accepted as a motion, make sure that I have the correct wording.
Okay. Councillor, are there any other comments before we proceed further? Councillor Cunningham.
I'm still concerned about the 30-meter setback from the property line on the east side of the property. I asked for some maps to show exactly where that property line would be in relationship to the water, and I still haven't received them. I saw some at the display put on by Exxon and they were conflicting there. There was two different maps with two different boundaries. And I would like that clarified, because if the boundary is as close to the water as one showed, I do not want anything built within 100 feet of our property.
Well, certainly, and I think most people agree with you.
So I'd like that.
In talking to the proponents, they said the proposed development would be 4 kilometers away, but we need to be sure on our side before anything proceeds. Yes?
I'd like to see it in writing. That's
certainly.
All, Okay.
Councillor Cunningham. Or pardon me, Councillor Garon. Mr. Krekic, if you make note of that boundary concern, please.
How would you like to make the note, Your Worship, as a change in a building setback to 100 meters?
Councillor Cunningham?
Yes, I'd like to see a half a kilometer or a kilometer setback. But, again, that's why I want to see the map so I know what's realistic and what isn't.
This is absolutely the best map that we have. We don't have any better mapping than this.
They had some awesome maps down at the display, and I was told earlier in the week that we had access to them.
If they can forward it to us, we'll take a look at them.
Mr. Long, if you'd make that request from the proponent. Councillor Garon.
Thank you, Your Worship. Mr. Krekic, I know we had a conversation about mapping, and there's some system that we don't have that can accurately map that area. I forget what you said it was called.
It's called LiDAR, and it is a method as how to map the area to preciseness of quite fine details, which we do not have right now.
So I would be interested in seeing that kind of map for that area, but I know it costs a lot of money. But are the proponents using that type of mapping? Do you know?
We did have a conversation. I did request the information, but apparently has to go through their request channels, and so I haven't received it.
So does that type of mapping have a bearing on how accurate, is 30 meters an insignificant amount in compared to that type of mapping, or how does that work? Do you know what I mean? Like, is 30 meters really 300 meters, or is it 30 meters, 30 meters?
Well, the distance will be absolute, so 30 meters will always be 30 meters, but I imagine that the locations can be slightly different, and basically the level of accuracy we are working at is something being cut by an axe versus the accuracy that I think is being asked here to be dealing with something that's cut with a fine scalpel.
Thank you for your information.
Your Worship, I was wondering if we can send this back to, I don't see that there's any rush for us to, there's no need to rush this through, and so I was wondering if we could send this report with the appended community quality of life community plan and appended zoning bylaw back to staff to do two things. One is to tighten up the language regarding LNG so that it is LNG specific and nothing else can be done there except for LNG plus a residence and any buildings that need to be attached to that, but for LNG purposes only. And the second thing is to for staff to be able to consult with the proponent, Exxon, to have a look at their maps in order to draw that boundary between the parkland and the LNG zoning land, so that there is a large swath of land between our water supply and the LNG zoning designation.
Certainly. We'll, Mr. Krekic, I'll refer this matter back to staff. If you could make a note of the request there. I don't think anybody on the council here is that concerned about moving this ahead until we get it right to the satisfaction.
I just had a couple of comments.
Please go ahead.
I wanted to first of all say I agree with Councillor Cunningham. I'd like to see like a minimum of 500 meters to a kilometer, so hopefully that can be sort of addressed with them and finding out whether or not that works with what they've got planned. And so that would be the main thing. And I do agree with tightening up the language regarding natural gas.
Thank you. So we'll move on to item number B, which is a report from the city planner. This is regarding an application for a development variance permit at 545 6th Avenue East. The recommendation is that the development variance permit application number DP 14-16 for 545 6th Avenue East proceeds to the public notification process. Mr. Krekic, would you please outline the text of your request to council?
Certainly, Your Worship. This is a new application. We received it on July 17th, and the full application is attached to the report. The subject property is located in an established neighborhood, and on the context plan on the overhead projector, you can see the location of it. This is one of the vacant lots we recently identified within the city existing footprint, and the owner is proposing to build a new house on this corner lot. And this picture essentially shows the lot that's proposed for the development, and on the bottom is the plan where the building will be located, and the difference for the setback is approximately 2 feet from the rear property line. Corner lots are always a little bit awkward. Sometimes individuals will want to have it on what we would call here a main street, a 6th street, and in this situation, the applicant is asking to have his front entrance on the Eber Street along here, and in my opinion, this does not present any hardship in a neighborhood, and in fact is going to use one of the underutilized lots. Therefore, the applicant requires approval to proceed to public notification, Your Worship.
Thank you. I'll ask council's consideration of the recommendation. Moved by Councillor Cunningham, seconded by Councillor Carlick-Pearson. Discussion? Further discussion? Question has been called. Those in favor? Thank you. That motion's adopted. We'll move on to the next report from the city planner. This is again a development permit application. This time for number 119 8th Avenue West. Recommendation is that the development variance permit application number DP-14-15 for 119 8th Avenue West be approved. Would you please outline your reason for this request?
Certainly, Your Worship. This report was before the council. I made a mistake, an error, by putting it down on July 7th. In fact, it was on July 28th, at which time it was approved to proceed to public notification. The subject property is located on 8th Avenue East, and it is identified on the context map. The request is to reduce the front property setback in order for the builder to place a covered veranda entrance, which would look something like this. The reason for this DVP is clearly explained. I think something like this adds a good feature in our environment to entrance into a fairly small house. This is what we refer locally here as a wartime house, which is being refurbished to be essentially brand new. As of the date of this report, and in fact, as at 4 o'clock this afternoon, we did not receive any comments or objections that would prevent approval of this application, Your Worship.
Thank you. I'll ask council's consideration. Councillor Cunningham? You'll move it? Seconded by Councillor Carlick-Pearson. Discussion? Further questions? Question has been called. Those in favor? Thank you. It's adopted. We'll move on to reports, questions, and inquiries from members of council. Councillor Cunningham. Yes, please go ahead, Councillor Ashley.
I just wanted to, in our information package from August 13th, there was a letter from CN asking about meeting requests for mayor and council at UBCM.
Yes.
And I just wanted to see if we could try and arrange a meeting to talk about the waterfront area, if we could find a meeting time.
Okay. We'll leave that to staff to see if they can arrange a meeting time.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Councillor Thorkelson, do you have anything this evening?
No, thank you very much.
You're welcome. Councillor Kinney.
Thank you, Your Worship. I'd just like to, at this time, wish all our seniors good luck. They're leaving for the senior games, and I hope they do as well as they did last year.
Thank you. Councillor Cunningham.
A couple meetings ago, I inquired about having a drop-off zone in front of the doctor's offices on Second there, and Gina had pointed out that there's a handicap parking around the corner. I've noticed that that handicap parking is underutilized now because I think it was specifically put there for one person that used to work in the Tricor building. He no longer works there, and I would like to see that relocated because I still see a lot of seniors and people that are having difficulty walking and that getting dropped off, being double parked, and whoever is dropping them off to accompany them has to go around, look for parking, and come back again.
Right.
And I'd really like, I think it would be an asset to have a parking or loading and unloading zone right in front of the doctor's office. You've got two doctor's office and a dentist's office.
Certainly
right
very similar to what the Maragna Brothers Mall has on 3rd Avenue. Right. Mr. Long, if you'd look into that, please. Anything further? If not, I'll read the mayor's report. Along with 2 members of the Royal Canadian Mounted Police, I provided a greeting and welcome to the cruise ship passengers from the motor vessel Regatta that visited Prince Rupert on Tuesday, July 29th, 2014. I also met with representatives of the Independent Investigators Office of British Columbia who have investigative jurisdiction over the Royal Canadian Mounted Police in British Columbia and some other policing agencies. At that meeting, they gave a brief history of their organization and spoke to the type of work they facilitate. Councillors Cunningham, Garon, and Kinney were also in attendance. I participated in a barbecue luncheon hosted by the Member of Parliament, Nathan Cullen, and the Member of the Legislative Assembly, Jennifer Rice, and volunteered with 2 members of the Royal Canadian Mounted Police and other community representatives. The luncheon was held at the Mariners Memorial Park, and it was by donation, with the money collected going to the Hospice Society. I attended in the Northwest Regional Hospital District meeting for the month of August. Discussions included community health needs, the level of ambulance services and response, and also topics to be taken to the Minister of Health meetings and the Minister of Community Sport and Culture at the 2014 Union of BC Municipalities Conference. Councillor Kinney was also in attendance. I provided a greeting on behalf of City Council and words of encouragement to those participating in the 2014 Kidney Walk to raise awareness about kidney disease and raise money to fight that disease. There is no cure, and kidney dialysis or a kidney transplant are the only options. Currently, 250,000 people have kidney disease in British Columbia. I met with Miss Selena Robinson, the MLA and opposition critic to the Ministry of Community Sport and Culture, and discussed a variety of community and regional topics. Some of these included the need for low-cost housing accommodation, the reduction in BC Ferries service, the Simpson Access Project, the ambulance service and the delay in response times, support for the airport access road on provincial government land, and subdivision of lands adjacent both sides of the Ridley Island Access Road. I suggest to City Council members that we send a letter to the Provincial Government Parks Branch requesting that they grade the dirt road from Highway 16 to the Diana Lake picnic site. The road has a lot of potholes and needs some maintenance. Our residents have very few of these facilities close to Prince Rupert, and keeping road access in good condition is important. I suggest we also send a copy of the letter to the District of Port Ed requesting their support. The Prince Rupert Airport Authority has advised that the number of airline passengers traveling through the airport has again increased, and the overall increase for the period January 1st, 2014 to July 31st, 2014 is 7.06% over the same period in 2013. On behalf of the city, I'd like to acknowledge some community groups and corporate citizens for their sponsorship of recreation activities. Thanks to the local Rotary Club for contribution to the resurfacing and refurbishing of the Rotary tennis courts, which have been in the community and they've been contributing to since 1952. I'd like to thank the Rupert Square Tenants Association for their contribution of 4 free public skate sessions and 2 free public swim sessions to be scheduled between September 2014 and January 2015. And thanks to Ridley Terminals Incorporated for a 4-hour family time for swimming, skating, and full use of the whole recreation complex. Also thanks to the Canadian Union of Public Employees, Local 105, for a free public swim. And finally, thanks to the Recreation Advisory Commission for their efforts and support to increase the use of the city's recreation facilities. My last item is that recently there was an article in the local newspaper entitled "Watco Backer Questions Council's Motives and Integrity." As has been announced previously, the concerns of the city regarding Watco's abilities to proceed are heading to court. As it concerns our city council, all members of council are interested in having Watson Island generate the greatest benefit for our city and the region in terms of taxation and employment opportunities. While I can't say much more as the matter proceeds to court, I can advise that Prince Rupert City Council has never received a written submission, an offer to purchase, or a request to commence any activities on Watson Island by Jason Yong Kim of Global Resources and Energy Enterprises. If Jason Yong Kim believes Watco has partners including CN Rail, Samsung, and Hyundai, he is welcome to provide written proof in court. That concludes the mayor's report this evening. I'll ask council for a motion to adjourn. Moved by Councillor Kinney, seconded by Councillor Garon. Any discussion on the motion? Question's been called. Those in favor? Thank you. This council meeting stands adjourned.